Hello everyone, and welcome to this month's participant webinar entitled Blue Collar Wellness, Staying Healthy in a Physically Demanding Job. This is Gary Sams, the Chief Wellness Officer for Ebix Benefits Administration and Wellness, and I'm happy to be back with you this month. Talk about a topic I don't believe we've covered before, that of addressing blue collar employees and their wellness needs and interest. And the things I'm going to cover this month are going to just briefly define what a blue collar worker is, those jobs and the scope of them in our economy. And primarily I'm going to focus though on staying healthy when you do have a physically demanding job. And this is a topic that I'm very interested in that for most of my life I've had physically demanding jobs and have worked physically when I wasn't involved in my 9-to-5 work as a Chief Wellness Officer. My family, I think I've mentioned it in other presentations, comes from a construction background. My father was a stonemason, and from the time I was 12 years old on, in the summers and weekends, I would work with him and other masons on job sites. So I certainly know what it's like to work physically hard. So again, excited to present this topic this month. So what is a blue collar worker? Lots of different definitions, but I found this one in Wikipedia. A blue collar worker is a working person who performs manual labor. Blue collar work may involve skilled or unskilled manufacturing, mining, sanitation, custodial work, textile manufacturing, power plant operations, farming, field work, construction, electrical, plumbing. There's lots of different occupations listed here. And they kind of summarize it by saying blue collar work often involves something being built or maintained. But that process of building or maintaining things like buildings, roads, equipment is physically demanding. And thus, again, we refer to that as blue collar work. Regarding the scope of blue collar work in our economy, there are roughly 20 million blue collar workers in the U.S., and that represents approximately 14% of the total workforce. And I got that number from the Center for Economic and Policy Research. So there's a lot of working that do blue collar work, physically demanding jobs. And last year there was an interesting study that came out that looked at, and this was looking at workers in the United Kingdom, and found that men who had physically demanding jobs had an 18% increased risk of early mortality as compared to men who had less physically demanding jobs. And that kind of raised some eyebrows, because we have always said that being physically active was health protecting and health promoting and better for us. And then this study comes out and sort of throws some question on that. But unfortunately, that particular study, it didn't look at the lifestyles of the physically demanding jobs, meaning even though that person may have been in construction, for example, did they use tobacco products? Did they have a healthy diet? Did they get enough sleep? All of those different lifestyle related issues and risk factors that we talk about a lot in these programs. And so they didn't control for that, so it really kind of put a damper on the validity of that particular effort. And one researcher that I read, and that I quote here, Mark Hammer, who studies exercise as medicine at Loughborough University, believed that the findings can be explained by just what I mentioned, that manual and office workers having very different lifestyles. And he pointed out to another study that was done last year as well, that looked at over 500,000 people in China, that found that physical activity had health benefits, whether it was work or in leisure time. And the message that he summarized, his interpretation of the article and the study, was that people should try to follow the physical activity guidelines regardless of what they do for a job. And people should be thinking about their lifestyles more generally because that is likely to be at the root of any differences that we see between physically active jobs and less active jobs. So just wanted to address that at the start here, that kind of controversial study that came out last year. From my perspective, I agree with Mark in that we should all try to practice and live by the physical activity guidelines of getting 150 minutes at least of purposeful activity every week. And by purposeful, that means going out for a walk or run or cycling or whatever that is, the type of activity that gets your heart rate up for a sustained amount of time, and you reap the benefits from that cardiovascular activity, and then you have rest. And I've tried to address overall lifestyle here with some general guidelines that I think it's important to follow, and I want to present these in kind of an aspect that you may not have considered before, and that's the aspect or the idea of being an industrial athlete. And that's how I view people that have physically demanding jobs. It's no different than athletes that are performing in an athletic event or in practice, what have you. You're looking at those with physical jobs as athletes. And what do we tell athletes? Athletes, they have a warm-up, they go through their exercise, they have a cool down, and along with that, we try to get people to practice healthy lifestyles, that are athletes. And that encompasses the main things, that we've talked about many times in these programs. For example, sleep. If you're an industrial athlete, and really all of us, you need to aim for 7 to 8 hours of good sleep per night. And that can be a challenge when you're an industrial athlete or a blue-collar worker, and that many times those jobs involve shift work. We know that that can be a particular challenge if you're working different shifts to get that good solid 7 to 8 hours per night of sleep. So that's an area that needs to be focused on. Nutrition. Aim for a balanced diet of whole foods focused mainly on plant-based consumption, and don't forget staying hydrated. Again, pointing back to that industrial athlete concept, we know that athletes spend a lot of time and effort making sure that they're well hydrated, drinking enough water, and you need to do that as well if you have a blue-collar job. The physical activity part, as I've been touching upon, we need to consider the value of leisure time activity in getting that 150 minutes of activity per week, purposeful activity per week, that's kind of beyond our job work. And I would really encourage everyone in that situation to really think of what good exercise and a good exercise session looks like. And that again is having a warm-up period, an activity period, and a cool down period, and not to forget stretching. Whether you're preparing for your exercise or preparing for your work as an industrial athlete, stretching is very important. And I know in a lot of the facilities that we service with our programs that are manufacturing or blue-collar based, many of them have incorporated organized mandatory stretching periods before, during, and after work to really help address that issue, so that your muscles are limber and loose to help prevent strains and sprains. Stretching is a really important component of well-being and physical activity. I think we'll do a session on that sometime because it is so important and it's something that we often overlook. And then finally, rest. Along with the sleep that we mentioned, we have to remember that our muscles need time to recover. And so making sure that we're attentive to getting enough rest and the right type of rest is really important. So if you're an industrial athlete, you're a blue-collar worker, get enough sleep, practice good nutritional habits, think of physical activity beyond the physical job that you do and what you can do to balance that out and make sure that you're attentive to rest. So in conclusion, there are definitely benefits to physically active jobs, but there are also risks. There are risks from overuse and other things that we need to be mindful of. On the one side, there's a risk of doing too much and you have that exertion, and on the other side, there's the risk of being inattentive to the right kind of activity and the importance of other lifestyle habits. Sometimes, particularly for young active blue-collar workers, I think they feel, well, I'm getting enough exercise every day, I'm so physically active, I can eat whatever I want, drink whatever I want, I don't need to attend to that. And that's just not the case. We all need to pay attention to those lifestyle factors. So thank you so much for your time and attention this week. Make sure you practice those good habits, and look forward to speaking with you again soon.